Howdy. Well, I have struggled for days, weeks, trying to figure out the content of this program. What should we talk about? And we could easily talk about the problems of the race and our gender, the human species seeming to face insurmountable challenges and the world falling apart. But it seemed we should start with relationship challenges, especially male-woman relationship struggles. So I have to figure out how I managed to spend over 5 decades and learn nothing about how to relate to a woman. I don't know if this will interest you or not. I was taught nothing about relating to anybody, women, children, anybody. I was taught that what was important was to support a family. That was it. Now remember, I was born in 1930. The Great Depression started in late 1929. So it was really a huge challenge for a great many Americans at that time to support their family. And that's what males were taught. Do that and everything else will be fine. My teacher was my mother. I was not very involved with my father. My father was an alcoholic. And we did eventually spend a couple of years together in the early part of World War II and all. That's a different story. But early years, all mother. And my mother felt a great duty to do the best she could to raise her child. She was never interested in having any more children. Very bright, when she grew up and went to nursing college, it was in the roaring 20s, and she was a very attractive woman and very determined to be independent, and to be a nurse was her choice. And that was a very hard life for women, 12-hour shifts, at least 6 days a week, and very low pay. But more or less, there were very few choices available for women in the 1920s, and that was her choice, and one of the better choices, perhaps, for lifelong financial independence, it turned out. But you were trained as a nurse to not get emotionally involved with any of your patients. And her first hospital experience was World War I, terminal veterans. And so, and she had been determined in school not to let matters of the heart interfere with her getting a degree and so on. And eventually I'll tell you the story of how she met my father and how she decided to marry him, quite a while before she got pregnant with me. But she was taught that, well, a woman's duty is to see that her child is properly raised, or children, and maybe make a home, but not necessarily to teach anyone anything about how to relate. And I don't know that she felt confident of her skills in relating to males. Most males were a disappointment in my mother's life, and most males are a disappointment possibly in yours. I had a high school girlfriend, but she didn't know anything about relating, and I didn't know anything about relating. We were both only children, and we were startled to find that we were partners in school, and we were the big debate team in Montana, and a bunch of things in theater and drama and so on. But And I will never forget Pat. She was my introduction to being allowed even to be near a woman with little clothing, and that happened a few times, but I never learned a damn thing about how to relate to her, and she figured that out and dropped her relationship with me once we got out of high school. First wife, Margie, had been married. She was older, 8 years older, had a son, and I was a good choice for her as far as meeting her needs. Not emotional, not erotic, monetary. Uh, we were both in school at the University of Washington. She, I think, was ahead of me, probably graduated a year or two before I did. Very handsome woman, very well developed, very erotic. She'd been in Hollywood, not as an actress, but working behind the scenes. And in our marriage, she came back to Hollywood, and we did our first successful screenplay together. But she was quite controlled in her enthusiasm for erotic. She didn't teach me how to arouse her or please her or anything. As long as I kept the charge accounts open and she had a car that would run and an okay place to live, and she sort of put the responsibility for dealing with her son on me. And after 8 years, she went away. Went back to university and got another degree and started a whole new life. And my second wife, the mother of my three children, was what we all call trophy wives. I was 8 years her senior, and I was very successful at network television by then and started my own independent company, and it became well known, and it was very successful. And she was a stunning physical beauty and 18 when I met her and had just moved out of her father's apartment like 3 nights before we met or something. And so I met all of her needs, the money needs and shelter and food and clothes and cars and in a style she had only dreamed of as a child. Her father was a very questionable male, and she had a very insecure childhood, and he took her away from her mother when she was 5. And so she had everything that she had ever dreamed of, and we went to very exciting places. We were television hot shots and blah, blah, blah. Um, but I don't know how much she knew about male-woman relationships, but she taught me very little. Um, I was at work most of the time, and alcohol was a growing problem in my life, and so I wasn't acceptable on the intimate side at all. Um, Now, when she took off to become a nightclub singer, here are these 3 little children, these 2 girls, 1 and 2, and this boy, 5, and the old family dog in this empty old house in Sherman Oaks up in the mountains, and me. And Gary got together with a couple of guys I had given stock to in my company, and turned out they could expel me, and they did. So everything went at the same time, the marriage and the company and the everything. And I knew enough then to know that women were smarter than men, and had always had a key woman in my company, but didn't have any interpersonal relationships of any depth. And it turned out that no matter how hard we searched, 12 years went by and we couldn't find a woman that was interested in us as a family and interested enough to tackle joining us until the girls hit puberty and we had to find an adult woman, and we found Hannah. And Hannah had never met motherless children. And she knew instantly the needs were overwhelming, and she had raised her younger two daughters, and her son, and she knew how to do that. And she knew how to do all kinds of things. She was a successful woman, worked in the back rooms and financial activities. And she had gotten to a point, she'd had two bad marriages. One, the long one, physically very abusive. And so she actually set out to learn if there was different males, some better and some lesser. And she was sorting through all of that when she and I met. And she was very open-minded and very determined and very successful. And she could attract all kinds of males, and she could grade them and analyze them. And I think primarily because of the needs of the children. I was no worse than any of the rest of them. But she set out to teach me how to relate. And I had learned something about how to relate to children in those 12 years. And I had done that by only studying women, who were the only humans who knew how to meet needs. And so I only read things women wrote, and I only listened to women. And that started 40 years ago, and it's never changed, and it will never change. I'm only talking to women now, and I will only listen to women. And none of us should waste our time on males, except if you're bored as a hobby. Maybe that would be okay. Hannah eventually decided to learn what in intimate relationships would please her. She already knew that many of the things she had encountered in her first 30, 40 years and first two marriages and so on were kind of disappointing and boring and predictable and so on, which you may have learned also. So she actually set out to learn from men and from women what would be of interest to her in her life that would make that part. She was successful in business and child raising and all of those things. And, and she somehow realized that she could teach someone if he wanted to learn. And I suppose that terrified me at the beginning, but it fascinated me. And eventually we got to the place where I was a real determined, dedicated student, learning everything I could about women, including what might please them or arouse them or briefly satisfy them. And that's when I began to realize there's maybe 18 different women who live in you, and all the different things that they may agree on. There are a lot of differences in those women, and you can call it the mood of the moment, but whatever it is, what may excite and satisfy one is perhaps a little discouraging or disgusting or boring to another. So depending on which woman is in control at the moment, you don't know quite what to do next. And I mean, really, males can't seduce women. You're so smart and aware and ahead of us. You can seduce us. There's no problem. Everything on the intimate side of life, women can make work effortlessly, which is one of the reasons they get bored. But the reverse of that is not true. And it's, oh boy, I'm just running out of time. I can't get used to these short programs. Okay, we're going to wrap this up. And maybe the next story I'll tell you the first actual encounter I had with a member of your gender and how it stunned me. And now, 68 years later, I'll tell you that story. Email Hannah, womansview@AOL.com.